of silence and invoke the Mother's presence for the manifestation of true Auroville.
I would like to take the opportunity today to talk about two issues that I feel are very relevant. They are relevant on three levels. It's on a personal level. For me personally, I find them very relevant at this moment, and they are also relevant for Auroville as a collective. And they are equally relevant, I think, on the larger collective of the whole world, if we look at what is happening today. The first topic that I would like to discuss is reality and the perception of reality. How do we know what things are and whether they are real or not? So in the context of what is happening in Auroville, it's very difficult at this moment for people who are not physically here to understand what is going on, because they hear a lot of things, but they don't necessarily know whether that is true or not. And the same was for me personally before I came to Auroville. How did I learn about Auroville and what did I know about Auroville? I got to know about Auroville when I was ready to not board the airplane in Brussels when I came to India for the first time, and when I came to the ashram. I had booked a 6 weeks stay in the ashram, which was at the beginning of December 2000, so almost 22 years ago. And at the airport in Brussels, at that time, that flight got completely delayed, was all kinds of troubles with the flight, and there was almost a little fight happening at the boarding gate, because the airplane had been replaced by a smaller airplane, and that smaller airplane couldn't take all of the people that had been booked, so people were left behind, that was clear. And in that whole kerfuffle, there was a German person who started asking me questions. And he asked, are you going to Pondicherry? Yes. Are you going to the Sri Aurobindo ashram? I said, yes. How do you guess that? He said, well, most people who fly to Chennai and who are Westerners will go there. And then he said, so I asked, are you part of the ashram? I know nothing. In fact, I had decided to make that trip by starting to read the book, The Adventure of Consciousness, by Satprem, of course. It's a very, 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 very famous book here that brought many, many people to Auroville, and to the ashram probably, but many more even to Auroville, as Auroville has a much higher number of foreign residents than the ashram has. The ashram has only something about 1,000, 1,500 foreigners. The majority of the ashramites are Indian, while Auroville has a lot more people from abroad. So at that moment, this was the first person, I think it was the first time that somebody told me the name of Auroville. And this was a German person who was standing there, who ended up being on the flight while I wasn't. And he said certain things about it. And since I was on a brand new adventure, discovering things I had never heard or seen about, I didn't even know what an ashram was when I came. I had no clue. The book had somehow conveyed to me the idea that I needed to come to Pondicherry and figure out what that ashram from Sri Aurobindo and the mother, what that all was about. And this person started talking to me about Auroville, but I wasn't really interested because I first of all had to discover the ashram yet. I didn't even know what the ashram was. So I just very quickly heard something about Auroville, a place, and there's interesting things happening, and at the same time there are problems. So when I had come here and I was staying in the ashram, in fact I think I landed on a Monday, and on a Wednesday, one of the persons in the guest house where I was staying, which was International Guest House, there was a person from Bengal, his name was Amitabh, and he, at that morning, asked me, "Hey, Lieve, I'm going on the bus tour to Auroville, are you joining me?" I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" I mean, I had no clue what I was doing here anyway. And thanks to him, I had already figured out that I wasn't here to look at India and to visit temples and to go to Arunachala and do things like that. I was here to just figure out what is the Sri Aurobindo ashram and what is the integral yoga and where do I fit in and what does that all do to me. And so I went on that bus with all of these people. I was the only white person in the bus. Must have been about 20 people or so. I don't know, I can't reckon, 20, 25 people. We went to the visitor center, which at that time didn't yet have the expo hall. So there was only what is considered the old part of the visitor center with earth bricks or something of the sort. And in there we got a presentation about Auroville. So they showed us a short video of a few minutes. And when I saw that video, my mind was completely blown. It's like, I remember very vividly that moment when I was watching that video, hearing the voiceover talk about that project of the mother where everybody would live in a different way. I mean, it was heaven on earth. It's the description of heaven on earth. So I was really blown away by the idea that there is a place on earth that is actually trying to be that place or something, or was supposed to be that place. I didn't know anything. I was here since 10 minutes or so. What did I know about Auroville? So I saw that video and time stood still and I was really taken by it. And then we went with the ashram bus to Center Guest House. We went to see Matrimandir, which wasn't finished like it is now yet. There was all kinds of scaffolding inside. Stuff was happening there. And when we went in the visitor center itself already, I had an awkward feeling somehow that something was not really the way I had been told in that video. So when I looked around, first of all, there was an exhibition about it, and I saw the galaxy plan. I saw the galaxy model. And when I saw the galaxy model, I was really like, wow, that's gorgeous. Wow, this is a city. Wow, magnificent. And then next to that was a donation box where they were asking for money. And I had the idea, well, it's very Western, isn't it? I mean, immediately, from the moment they see you, they need money. So I was a bit taken, I didn't like that very much, that was immediately asking for donations for the lands of Auroville and things. At that moment, I didn't know much about the mother yet, because the book, The Adventure of Consciousness, is mainly about Sri Aurobindo. Its mother was still completely alive. Satprem was with her in the ashram, and Satprem had taken up the book as an exercise to write, at the one hand, the life of Sri Aurobindo, and at the same time give an explanation of the integral yoga. So these two combined. So the mother didn't, even though he quotes mother in these things, her life doesn't feature in it, and she as a personality didn't really feature in it, so I didn't know much about it. I hadn't even finished the book by the time I was on the flight. I think I was halfway through the book or so. Reading The Adventure of Consciousness for me was very difficult at that time because I had zero knowledge about India spirituality, Indian philosophy, Indian traditions, Hinduism. I knew nothing at all. My closest thing to spirituality was probably some new age kind of things. Even though it resonated with me deeply inside, the manifestation or the realization of these things in my life was nearly non-existent, and everything that would go in that direction would be labeled automatically New Age. There was floaty kind of stuff in Europe. You don't really discuss these things much unless you're kind of floaty person. So I had to discover a lot of things. This is interesting. The ants have taken over the juice. I'm really sorry. It's... I would love to drink it. Shall I quickly drink it? Is it? Am I committing a very crime? They're very, very, very tiny ants. I don't think I do a big crime if I drink them. Do I? Okay, and then they will find another place to go to now. Sorry for that. So, I had to discover about everything, about the yoga itself, when I was already, for the first time, in Auroville. So we then looked around in the visitor center, and one of the things that I remember very vividly, because it made such a weird impression on me, is that there were two Western ladies having tea, and then somehow got into a very short, brief interaction with the group I was part of. I don't even know how long, and when the ashram did these bus tours, I think they did them twice a week at that time. It was in the morning, and it left, well, I don't know, it left 10, 11 o'clock or so, and then we ate something in Auroville, I think, because I remember that we went inside Matrimandir, which was a very short, brief visit that went to the door of the chamber, and there you can just peep inside. I'm sorry, not poop. You could peep inside, and just people would stand with their arm in front of the door, and you could just bend over and have a look at the chamber. And once you had done that, I think you can book for half an hour meditation at some times, but you needed to come back then for these things. So at that moment, everything was new. Everything that I saw, I hadn't had background about Auroville really. I hadn't read a book, I hadn't seen a documentary, I hadn't read an article. I didn't know really anything. So what I saw was Auroville firsthand for me. So in the visitor center, there were these two ladies drinking tea, and there were these Indians saying something like, "How are you here and what is things?" And one of the ladies shouts back, "Can't you see, we're in paradise?" And I thought, well, but paradise is not just physical, a few trees and a nice clean environment or something. Paradise, for me, is something totally different, because paradise can only come with spirituality and consciousness. The reason why I had started to read the book, The Adventure of Consciousness, was exactly that word of consciousness. I was very, very much interested in learning more about consciousness and the concept of consciousness and expanding consciousness. And I'm physically never attracted to any kind of drugs or psychedelics or something, so I never had these, what they call consciousness widening experiences or expanding, the psychedelics kind of thing. I never had done that. And I've still not done it, and I was never really attracted to it because it always seemed artificial. It never seemed like this is a real natural state to be in. So, but I was very interested in knowing what would happen when you are in that state of consciousness that is then expanded, or you can see other things, or you can, I mean, what everybody says in high school is that you can smell colors and you can see smells and stuff like, I mean, just mix-up of our senses. So when I heard these ladies say we're in paradise, I thought, well, I'm going to suspend my judgment on that a little bit, because I think that paradise for me is something where the main characteristic would be how people are and the happiness of people and how people behave with each other and what does that all do? It's a society that would create heaven on earth, and not just a few palm trees and a nice clean visitor center. So afterwards, when we went to Center Guest House I also had that kind of an idea that I was looking at a lot of Western entitlement kind of things, where people claimed a lot of things, that I had the feeling, well, I'm not interested in what you say it is. I want to feel what it is and experience what it actually is on the ground. After that initial day, I came back to Auroville. During my 6-week stay in Pondi, I came back to Auroville several times to have yoga classes. I cycled up and down, and I quite liked it. Somehow it was not as far as I thought it was. When I think back of cycling up and down to Pondi by now, I think, oh my God, it's so far away. How did I do that? But at that moment, it didn't feel that far. At the same time, I was on a holiday and I had time. So who cared whether I was cycling for half an hour or more or what? I mean, it didn't matter if I was cycling for an hour. It was anyway, the weather here, it was winter weather, and it was quite summery for me, so it was still quite sweaty. But I liked it, and it was mainly in the later afternoon that I would come here, because these yoga classes would take place at 5 or 6 o'clock or so, or 4 o'clock or something. So I would not be in the heat of the day. I had learned at 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock, they were quite difficult timings, but anyway. So I came here, and I tried to figure out a bit, but my initial interest was absolutely in the ashram and absolutely understanding the yoga of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, and learning about these things. And in a very non-Western way probably, I don't know, but in a very intellectual probably way, I was not originally very attached or attracted to the mother herself. Because the book had been about Sri Aurobindo, I was interested in Sri Aurobindo. I came for the ashram of Sri Aurobindo. And so I thought, what is that French woman doing there? What do I have? Why is this a package deal? I mean, I need to take her as well. I can't just have Sri Aurobindo. No, that's clear. It was very clear from the beginning that whatever you read from Sri Aurobindo or something, you immediately have the mother there. So it's really something you cannot really decide upon. And there is one experience, a small thing that I can quickly say, even though I don't like to talk about these things, is that I tried to learn meditation and things. I mean, I gave everything a try, you know. And I'm discovering the ashram. I know nothing. So I'm just trying to, okay, what am I supposed to be doing? So I'm supposed to be sitting in silence and concentrate and do things. So I give all of that a try. And there is one moment where I feel that my head is drawn constantly to a certain spot, and I think, what is this? Why is my head going there? And then I opened my eyes, and I saw that I was looking, there was a picture of the mother. And I really felt that she was pulling me. She was like a magnet somehow saying, me, get into me, find me, something like that, find me. It's like, I'm here, do these things. It's a very personal, I really don't want to go deep into these things, but my relationship with the mother later, after I had gone back, I think, it took me some time to digest everything, and I think I understood at one point, it's not a clear point, I think this was a gradual understanding, that I noticed that the mother, in fact, had been guiding me through all my life, because I could see that in many instances, already from years and years and years ago, that there had been these things where like an invisible hand had done something in my life and had made me magically, against my own wishes or against my own understanding, or so, had made sure that I was at the right place at the right time. And I did these things without consciously understanding or even wanting things consciously to go that way. So I understood in the end that Mother had been with me from the beginning, and I very, very strongly feel that. I mean, it's Mother has been there and has been she has been, in a sense, the kind of practical part of what I had always had as a very close contact with God. Even in Europe, of course, I was raised as Catholic in Belgium. It's very hard to escape that in Belgium. Flanders, as Catholic, is very, very strongly Catholic, less now, but at that time still. Because of the historical events that have happened, Flanders was very open to Protestantism when it started, but then Flanders wasn't, Belgium didn't exist yet. So Flanders was a part of Spain, dependent on the Spanish crown, was territory of the Spanish crown. And the Spanish king, Philip II, didn't allow Protestantism at all and sent an army to kill everybody in Flanders that was Protestant. And all of these people fled to the north, to Holland, and that's how Holland became Holland and is Protestant. But so in Flanders, only Catholicism was allowed and left. And that's, we're talking about 5 centuries ago. So it's still embedded in that country. There's very deep Catholicism. So I had grown up with a very close relationship to God somehow, even though I understood I couldn't really talk about that with other people, because I could see that at school not everybody had that kind of relationship. And I thought I would be considered quite insane if I would say that for me God was always there. I would never be alone, really. There would always be a presence with me. And so later on, I could identify that the closest part and the most practical part, the part that really guided and saved me and did things in my life, was the mother. Anyway, that's for me how she is. So now, back to the topic that this was about, in fact. What is the perception of reality then? So I had experienced a little bit of Auroville, and when I went back home, I knew that I would come and live in India because I had felt here something. I felt more at home than I had ever felt before. And I couldn't really find that. In fact, I was very, very, very sad that I had to leave. My biggest wish was to simply stay. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to take up that old life. I really felt like, I want to be here. There is something in me that has opened. I've discovered something. I want to remain here. But when I went back, I had the idea, okay, I'm going to come back and live in India because that's, I didn't know whether it was in the ashram or whether it was in Auroville or whether it was anywhere else also. But very soon afterwards, I had the idea, no, I don't want to be in Auroville. I mean, anything will be better. I think Auroville is way too Western, way too hypocritical, way too new agey, way too... It didn't feel right. It didn't feel authentic in a way. And I was looking for authenticity and for real spirituality and real understanding of reality. Really, what is the universe? What is the world? What is life? What are we meant to do? What is this thing? And I had a very strong feeling that Western people aren't really the ones that are able to give that understanding or to explain that. So when I had gone back, the funny part is that I was planning on being back within a year, but it took me 7 years, in fact, to get everything in order and to get the plan to come back here. But in all of these years, I was really more and more convinced that I would never come to Auroville because that Auroville was really not it. Then happened the 18th of September 2007. I was rereading the book Beyond Man by George van Vleeken. I had shipped 2 boxes of books over when I had been here in 2001. I chipped over a lot of books and I had started reading and I had read the whole agenda and things. And at that time I was rereading it. The book, I had come across the book when I was here. He had just published it. And I was rereading it and I was rereading on that day the chapter about Auroville. And suddenly I had a very strange experience that I normally never, it's a very, very unique experience in my life. Is that while I was rereading that, or at the end of the chapter, suddenly there was a kind of an epiphany. I understood something. And it was like I had a talk with Mother. It was like Mother's presence was very much there. And she was putting thoughts in my head. And she made me see that my judgment of Auroville was completely wrong. in the sense that, well, yeah, whatever the reality is the reality. But there is another reality of Auroville, and that is her dream, the vision, what she wants Auroville to be, the real Auroville thing. And she made me understand that it's so high and so far away. It's such a very, very, very ambitious project. It cannot just come in a few years. This is going to take ages, long time. At that moment, I really felt like this is going to take 200 years or so before we are somewhere where Auroville is really Auroville. And so I saw that, and at the same time, she gave me she made me look at myself like, look, you're now judging what is there, that very, very crude early beginning of that humongously high vision, high ideal. So what you're doing actually is you're waiting for these people to build a castle, pull out a red carpet, and then have you in. They need to make it all happen already. And then when it's there, you're willing to come and participate in it. And so she made me feel like, what do you want to do with this, with all of this? The reality is that it will need people to be executed. It cannot fall from the sky. It's a very high up vision, and it cannot be just magically realized. That's not how things go, and it's not possible. It needs people to actually see the vision and struggle through life and to get that vision materialized, realized. And she gave me a challenge at that moment. And it was a challenge like only the universe can give you challenges. It's a challenge without any judgment. It's a choice, in fact. It's choice, and there is no good and bad. You cannot choose wrong. It's just, here is an option, here is another option. What do you like? It's more or less like cookies. I have two sorts of cookies. Which one do you prefer? And you can't choose wrong, no? That's two different varieties of cookies. So she gave me the challenge, what do you want to do with your life? Do you want to sit here on the couch, have a little kind of ordinary life with your husband and things like that? Or do you want to spend the rest of your life materializing that vision, what you apparently can see, because you claim that it's so far off from the vision? So if you are able to see that vision so clearly, aren't you the ideal person to go and do that over there? And that moment was for me not a choice, in fact. It was like I was gripped with an enthusiasm, and it was like there was a spirit in me suddenly. I jumped out of bed. It was early in the morning. I was reading in bed. I jumped out of bed, went downstairs, opened my laptop, and just started Googling Auroville. Searching. I didn't use Google already anymore at that time. And I found the website of Auroville, and I started reading about everything I could find. And I took all of that as being real. And it probably more or less is or was. So from that moment, I started to study Auroville and get to know as much about Auroville as I possibly could for 2 years, because it took us 2 years to be able to come here, because my husband needed to save up holidays so that we could stay for at least 5 weeks uninterrupted. And so I studied as much as I could about Auroville. I tried to find every interview. I tried to find everything. I listened to Auroville radio at that time on repeat. It was ridiculous. I was completely brainwashing myself with Auroville. I was non-stop into Auroville. I woke up, got into Auroville, and just before I went to bed, I was into Auroville. So when I came here then, after that, there's a very sad story about my husband not being able to be here, and we had to split up. We were not officially married, but we lived like husband and wife, and he could not come, and I had to come alone. We came for 5 weeks together, and he hated everything because he knew that I was going to stay and he was going to go back. So when I came here, I had very difficult experiences, because the breakup from my husband was very emotional for me, very hard. And nobody here was there to be there for me. Nobody in Auroville, everybody was busy with their own things. There was no real, or I didn't find them, maybe that's the thing, but I had a very hard time, and I really felt very much left alone. But at the same time, I was ready at that time to take that challenge on. Because I had felt very, very strongly in the weeks that I was together here with him that this was my place and that there was something here for me. And so I was going to take the challenge, and I felt like Mother is there, her force is there will be something. But it was a very difficult time. And I saw a whole different reality of Auroville than what I had studied over over these 2 years. And it wasn't, I turned against Auroville quite quickly because of all of that, because I became very, very disappointed in everything. I had a very hard time. And I saw that everybody else was in fact also having a hard time. And I wasn't necessarily blaming them. I wasn't blaming the Aurovillians for the situation, but I could see that in this situation where Auroville is in such a difficult space, how can I expect other people to deal with my psychological issues that I'm going through and my emotional difficulties, while they themselves are struggling with the same thing of how do you do life? How do you do life if you want to do integral yoga? How is that all? And that whole thing is so difficult. So I was more disappointed with the whole thing, and I thought I had made a mistake. I thought I have it all wrong. I have trusted something in me that wasn't trustworthy, and I probably should go back. And I did go back to get my 5-year visa, my 1-year visa, my entry visa. And it was very hard to come back here. I didn't really want to come back, and my husband convinced me that I could come back for a few weeks, and that if it turned out to be so horrible, he would not refuse me to come back, and we could start life again probably, but we should have to talk about it, because he had suffered tremendously from our separation also. So I came back here very unwillingly. I was convinced I would not stay at that moment. I came back on an entry visa, and I thought, I'll book my flight back tomorrow. I can't stand any of this. I find it so harsh, so hard. And in the airplane coming back here, I don't know if many people have these experiences. I think everybody has these experiences, but you need to feel really at the bottom of the pit, more or less, for it, I think. I felt so bad. I felt so horribly bad that I really prayed to Mother, and I said, Mother, if there's anything that you feel I should do in Auroville, then you're going to have to do that, because I cannot. I'm incapable of doing all of this. This adventure of Auroville is way too big for me. I am way too small. I don't have any power, force, or any capacity to do these things. And I was very, very, very honest in telling her, I'm out of here in a few days, I think. My husband had told me, if after a few weeks you still feel so bad, but for me that was really like, that's going to not be weeks, it's going to be 3 days maximum. The first flight I can get back on, I'll be back. So I told her in the airplane that if I'm not doing this, I'm just not doing this, I cannot do that. I go there, I'll be there a few days, and I'll come back and take my life as it was before that whole epiphany moment. I'll just pretend that it never happened or so, and we'll just take it from there. Now, after I had arrived here, I arrived at lunchtime in Auroville back, and I needed to somehow struggle myself through the afternoon, because I didn't want to go to bed immediately, because I would wake up in the middle of the night, I think. So I wanted to make sure I didn't go to bed before 5 or 6 o'clock. And I had Marie here, who was adorable. She was really totally adorable. She was so happy to see me back. I had been working with her in Matrimandir. And she was just so joyful. And I felt so horrible that I was I was like a blob of negativity and blackness and depression and darkness. And I really felt so embarrassed that I couldn't be anything else but that at that moment. Well, she was all joyful and this and this and that. And so she had invited and she had asked to have dinner with her and her husband. And I felt like I'm the party pooper here, you know, I'm just spoiling the joy you all are having and I should retire. So at 6 o'clock or 6:30 or something after having that dinner, as quickly as possible, as soon as I finished eating, I said, I'll go back, I need to sleep, I'm way too tired. When I went, I was in Arka, and I went to sleep and I fell asleep like a log. I mean, it was like just switch off of the battery or something. I just total gone. And I woke up around 6 o'clock in the morning, and from the moment I opened my eyes, and this is a moment that I will never ever forget in my life, even though I can't feel it anymore, like I felt it at that moment. But that night, a miracle had happened in my life that for me was, and still is, a real life miracle. Something that had never happened before, that has never happened so far after. And that is, I woke up and I knew immediately that everything was different. Because during the night, and without me having any memory of anything, I didn't remember anything, but I only had the result of what had happened. It's like something happened during the night, and I could feel inside myself the result of that. And it was that someone, somehow, no idea who, what, where, had given me, shown me, had given me the knowledge, the certitude, I don't know how to say it. It was like, it was more certain than I've ever been certain of anything. It was more certain for me than the grass is green or something. It was more certain than the sunrise tomorrow. It was the biggest certainty in my life that, and it was again, I had that choice. There was a choice, and it was again like with the cookies, there's no judgment. It's purely your choice, and nobody else has anything to do or say about it, and nobody will ever judge you. You can do whatever you want. You can go back to Holland. You can do whatever. My husband was Dutch. So you can go back there. You can do whatever you want. But the knowledge that I had been given is Auroville is the best place in the world for you at this moment. So whatever you choose, just know that Auroville is the place that will be the best for you and for your growth. And again, from that, in that moment, there was for me there was no choice really. It was obvious. Just like the first time when I got that choice, it was obvious. And here also, it was obvious. That morning, I woke up with an enthusiasm, with a love for Auroville, where I was more home than I had ever been home, because I knew that my soul wanted to be here, and I was doing what my soul wanted. And that thing falling together was so... I can't explain it. It's an experience everybody will have to have for themselves. It's indescribable. It's a happiness that I was floating on air. I lived on that happiness for 2 whole years, more or less. It took 2 years to fade out of my life. For 2 years, I could feel that being lifted up by that idea that I was exactly there where my soul wanted me to be. And then over the years, well, yeah, we need to somehow get back to the topic of perception of reality. But so then, well, in fact, for years after that, I looked at the reality of Auroville from a completely different angle, because all of a sudden, Auroville, what it was really didn't matter. It was, for me, personally, it was the place. There was nothing else. It was home. It was everything that I needed, was Auroville. While Auroville, in fact, has the reality of the material reality that is there also. So it took me, in fact, I think about 4 years to start to get completely out of that, to have that whole experience worn off. So this is why at this moment, I know that it happened that day. But I think it was 17th of March 2010. But that feeling that I had that day, I don't have that anymore right now. I know it happened, I know that was like that, but I don't feel that happiness and that being so alive. I mean, that whole moment, the feeling of that moment is gone. Now, over the years of working in Auroville, I think everybody will come across many experiences that are difficult. Auroville is a very, very difficult experience and a very difficult experiment also. It's a very difficult place. And you have to find a way to deal with it somehow if you want to remain here. I mean, people find ways to deal with it by just leaving because it's too difficult and it's not, I mean, they can't find a way to get out of that mess. So after 4 years, I remember that I needed to go back to get my 5-year visa, and at that moment already, I had met people here that I didn't know before, but they were from Holland. And one of these persons was Jan-Pieter Derksen, who died past, I think a bit more than a year. And he visited me when I was with my parents in Bruges and with my family. And we had discussions about Auroville. And my mother overheard quite one of these discussions. And my mother told me afterwards, she said, look, if it's so difficult, you don't need to go back, you can stay here, it's okay. And it's because we were discussing Auroville the way it is, but it was, I'm so sorry for that. We were discussing Auroville, and it just turned very, very negative, very normally, very, very easily. It turned extremely negative because everything was not happening. The city wasn't being built. There was everything. I mean, we were both very, very much wanting to see the galaxy come up. Jan-Pieter had been here in the late 70s already from, I think he was here already from 74, 75 till 80 or so. And he had given tours about, giving explanations about Auroville and came with the ashram bus also at that time. I think he was on the bus in that famous incident where the bus was stopped by the Aurovillians. Well, the Aurovillians, the bus was stopped and the people from the society and the ashram were kicked out of the bus and not allowed into Auroville anymore with their daily, or I don't know, they had a bus coming from the ashram regularly and were not allowed in there. And he was on the bus when that happened, so he remembered that. So now, how can people today know what is happening in Auroville? Because it took me alone already more or less 4 years to start scraping the surface of something is really not as rosy here as they make it seem. So how do we exactly know? What I wanted to say. In the early days, when Auroville started, Auroville was here on that deserted plateau. It was extremely isolated. It was, even though it's only 15 kilometers away from Pondicherry, it's not so far away. Still, it is somewhere where there's nobody else. It was in the middle of nothing, more or less. And so the only way people could know what is happening here is by physically coming here and having a look. But who would come and have a look here for more than one? I mean, you come here, there's nothing here. What are you doing here? So why would you come and have a look for more than a few hours? If there's even someone like, I forgot his first name, but that person, El Kabash, who came and he made a documentary, quite a lengthy documentary about Auroville. He came here. He filmed it all himself. And still, how much did he get to know about Auroville? He must have been here only a few days or a week. How long would these people be here? 2 weeks? And what do they see of Auroville except everything that is shown to them specifically? Or he didn't live here as an Aurovillian. he came to make a documentary. So even though we have the documentary and we can look at the documentary and get an idea of what Auroville was at that time, still it is the experience that El-Kabach was able to have at that time with all of his willingness, and then cut up and edited and shown to us afterwards. So it's his interpretation of the information that he was fed or was able to get to. I'll always remember, I don't know whether it was striking for other people, but if you see the little sequence with Ange Peter, who is there as a 12-year-old girl, I think, and who looks, I found it extremely endearing to see her say always, "Mother will take care, Mother will take care, Mother will take care." At the same time, it can look to somebody else like, she's completely brainwashed. The girl can't say anything else. She can only say one sentence. Mother will do, Mother will decide. She's not capable of any thought. But I found her extremely endearing to watch. But still, what is the reality of Auroville that we get out of these images? Was every child like that? No, of course not. So how do we know what exactly happened? And I'm convinced that one of the aspects of that early Auroville that people have completely overlooked is the isolation of that location here at that time. There was more or less nothing around. There were a few, there were villages with people in it. Would they have been believed if they had said the things they saw? Were they able to understand? Were they able to know the things? How does one actually know exactly what is happening? Because even if we come personally, and even if we come and stay here for a few months, how much do we experience, and how much biased is it by our perception and our wishing, wishing Auroville to be what we want it to be? And so we read into what we see as what we wish it to be. It's so difficult. It's very, very hard to know the reality as an objective kind of reality. That is why people say everybody has their own truth and things like that. At the same time, in the ashram, when you go up to the rooms and you go on the staircase, there is cling to truth. Sri Aurobindo called the supramental consciousness the truth consciousness. So what is that truth that these people are talking about? If it's not graspable, if we cannot get to truth, if we cannot find, is it not material? Do we have to discard material reality as not being part of the truth? That's completely counter Sri Aurobindo's yoga. Sri Aurobindo explicitly and specifically said that his yoga is for a material result and to change the material life and to have, I'm going to do like this, I think, and to have the material manifestation of this world changed. That's the whole point. The whole point was not to go to nirvana and to have that kind of a personal liberation and get out of this thing. No, the whole point of the yoga was to make sure that the material manifestation on earth is changed. So how do we make sense of the fact that, but you don't know, you cannot know truth, everybody has their own truth, reality is ungraspable, you cannot really, and cling to truth and find truth and figure it out. I have always felt that there is a way to find the truth of material reality. You cannot claim that, but it's only about spiritual truth and high up truth. And no, there's also a material truth about these things. I mean, the fact that I'm sitting here today and having this talk is a material fact. It's something that we can verify. We can figure that out. We can figure out which flowers were on this table and which glass was standing here. So there is some kind of, if I say there was no glass on the table, then I'm lying, because there is a glass with water on the table. So how do we go about finding reality? Now, at this very moment in time, the reality of what is happening in Auroville is very important for very many people. Because if it wasn't important, then there wouldn't be dozens and dozens of people in Auroville right now busy with doing nothing and spending all of their time and their money on exactly that, making sure that there are people in the world who think certain things about what is happening in Auroville. If it wasn't important, all of that, why would they spend all of the time and energy about it? on that, and fill their days with only that, making sure that this statement goes there, this, many views, many things, it's influence of perception. So there must be an importance to it. So how can people know it in Auroville? How can people that are not physically in Auroville know what is happening here? We who are here in Auroville right now already perceive the reality of what is happening very differently. We don't all agree about it. So what is the solution here? My idea is that we need to put as many facts on the table with as little emotion as possible. And it's, as far as I can see, nearly it sounds the most simple and most rational and normal thing to do. And in reality, I have the feeling that it is the most revolutionary thing to do, because we are trained like monkeys to do the opposite. We are trained to discard facts and to react very strongly emotionally. That's the main thing we have to do, is have strong emotional reactions about whatever we're being fed is reality. And so I'm calling on to everybody to try to find as many facts. And I really hope that, for me, the only way out, if there is going to be any reconciliation in Auroville, it will have to come from trying to be as detached and unemotional as possible, and put every fact on the table, and put the whole picture on the table, the whole timeline, the whole things, how much do we have, and try to see from as many angles as possible, and try to understand. My understanding of divine consciousness is the consciousness that can see at the same time, in the minutest detail of every person, it's the consciousness of everything at the same time. That's difficult. We are in different bodies, we have our different perceptions. I can only have the consciousness that I have, and the perception and the understanding that I have from where I'm physically, from where I'm physically right now. Now, if I could, at the same time, look at myself from your perception, from your perspective, if I could see at the same time, have your understanding of what this reality in this little space here is, and then extrapolate that to everything in the whole universe and beyond, everything that is real, and if we can have the perception at the same time of everything, every standpoint, every viewpoint, every experience, everything that is conscious, everything is consciousness. There is nothing but consciousness. Even the stones and the wood on the stairs and the things have somehow consciousness. So if we can have the perception of this space and of this moment in time, from this space, from the consciousness, as well as from the cushion and the staircase and the thing, and everything together, if we can experience all of that at the same moment, then we have the divine experience. I think that's the divine consciousness. And I think that is what we are absolutely meant to grow into. We need to grow into an understanding. Let's first, of course, make it simpler and not involve what we call inanimate objects and things, because that's more difficult. But if we can already have the perception of more individuals of the same event at the same time, and see and put that in and glue that in, that would already help a lot to understand what the truth is and what reality actually is. What plays along also very much is that I think Hollywood has been very, very, very influential in that, is that we are trained through movies to think of stories and happenings, evolving things as linear. We are trained to look at linear plots, to have a story where there is one line of things, and there can be a little bit of things next to the line. There are some side plots in a movie and in stories. There is something happening aside. But there's always one main line. Reality is not like that at all. Reality is like the ball of yarn completely messed up. It's like everything happens at the same time from all kinds of different things, and it's not linear at all necessarily. There's just a lot happening. It's like a blob kind of thing where everything happens and everything influences each other, it's everything else. So things are not linear at all. To really have an understanding of what happens wherever in the world, at any time and place, if you want to understand really a certain reality of how it was, you have to have different perspectives and see how this was happening here, this was happening there, that and that, and that was all influencing each other. That was all influencing one another. I mean, this happened here because these and these and these things were influencing that. And almost all actions are always, specifically big actions in the world and things like that, big actions like what happens in Auroville, collective actions, collective happenings, are never a linear kind of thing where somebody did something and that had a big event. It's always because there are more players and more sides to it that are ready to take this up and react to it and have a... The event is always created from different it's different players that create an event, otherwise big events don't happen. Because people won't... There's always that inertia against big changes and big events. And big events can only happen when there are many sides that feel the benefit of it or have an openness toward it, or they make it happen. Otherwise, it doesn't. Anyway, am I still making sense somehow? Thank you so much. I have no clue about the timing. I don't know how far we are. What did you say? I can talk for hours more. That's not a problem. So the question of what is reality in Auroville, I mean, everybody will have to figure that out for themselves now. But I do feel it's very important that people know that it's very hard to know something, and that they need to be careful by hearing something if they have no way of knowing even whether it's factual or not. You know, there's a material factualism that you could check and can know. And if that is not even possible, then it becomes very, very slippery slope. Now, the other thing that I liked to try to convey or give some thoughts about is what identity is and what people are. This is also very much linked to the yoga, and because we are supposed to become more conscious of everything, not only of the reality outside of us, but the reality inside of us. So these are the two parts of reality that we constantly have to search. I find it a very, very interesting topic to have the inner and the outer. In Auroville, it's a very big issue. It always has been. Like we first need. It's the city and the growth of consciousness, the personal growth of consciousness. It's always been like that. So not building the city has been excused by saying we're not ready for it. We first need to grow, and it's more important that we grow, and then the city will grow out of our consciousness growth. Now, for me, living in Auroville, and specifically living in creativity was a blessing. I didn't want it. Mother forced me to live in creativity, more or less, because I really wanted to live in Citadin. And Citadin went wrong on all levels. And I remember very vividly that the insight that something was going on was given to me by Gopal, of all people, of Darkali. He told me, like, you see that Mother is not giving it to you, it's going wrong. You want it so bad, but it's blocked at every point, so you better start taking what comes to you. And even though I find it a very, very harsh way of putting something in my face, it was absolutely true. He was right. It's like that. You have to, the more you can let go of your preconceived ideas of what should happen or what needs to be, and you can make it, just see what the universe brings to you and gives you. So I got creativity. I didn't need to do anything to get into creativity. It all came by itself. I didn't even have the money ready, and everything went by itself. While I had been struggling for 6 months, or maybe a bit less, around 6 months, yeah, at least, to get into Citadin, and it just wouldn't materialize. So living in creativity has shown me very much, because I think when creativity was built, it was probably one of the densest places in Auroville. By now, I think Sunship has completely surpassed that, but Citadin didn't exist when creativity was built. Creativity was built in 2000, started 2001. And at that time, I think it was the densest place because there were 22 flats. There were about 30 people intended to live there, or live there. Over all the 20 past years, there have been about 30 people in creativity all the time. And it's quite a small space. If you look at how Auroville communities have been built, creativity was rather on a very small space, a lot of people. So you have to live close together with other people, and I found that a very, very big eye-opener, and it made me understand, in my perception, why the mother wanted to have a city of 50,000 people. Because for me, if you don't live close together with other people, and it's literally live, it's not only working together, it's also living together. If you don't have that experience of being confronted and having to deal with other people's lifestyles on a constant basis, on a daily basis, you don't have that push to grow and to look into yourself, and you're not confronted with the thing. It's the fact that we live close together, it makes you have to question, because you can't live close together with other people without conflict. I believe it's not possible. The state we are in, I mean, that level of consciousness where we ordinarily live in, doesn't allow for that. It will hurt itself, it will find problems, it will have difficulties. So we want to grow in consciousness, and to grow in consciousness, the confrontation constantly with other people is very, very, it's a big incentive. It's a big encouragement to do so. It's very difficult, it's very unpleasant, but it really pushes you to constantly be confronted with your own smallness. Why do I react like that? Why do I now? Why can't I let other people be? I have felt that in the beginning when I came into creativity, I was very much, oh yeah, of course, this one of the reasons why Auroville has created that rather completely absurd policy of being allowed to choose your neighbors has come out of that, because it is difficult and very personally unpleasant to be confronted with your own smallness if you live together with people who live in a very different way than you want, who have very different opinions on life than you have, who have all of these things are very confrontational and personal, and it pushes you very hard to go through that. And I think most people will naturally try to avoid these things because it questions who you are as a person in a very unpleasant way. It really shines a light on your smallness. Working will do that also in a side. When I worked in Matrimandir, I started working with the gardens, in the garden team. And I ended up also working in the access team and being inside. And I remember very much the moment that I thought, this is going very wrong, is when I started to have a fight over a ribbon in Matrimandir and have a really bad fight over a ribbon. I mean, it was the most idiotic thing. After that moment, I really thought, Lieve, how old are you? I mean, are you 5 years old that you're starting a fight over a ribbon? So you can have these kind of things in work where you are confronted with your own smallness and your own things, and you have to, I mean, my understanding of the yoga is that you learn to see these things and to try to change that and not excuse it. Of course, I can find 5 million to shut everybody up that was making noise after 9 o'clock. Because I was accepted in creativity. It was all okay. We can do like that. We had these rules that everybody needed to just fit into I mean, there was a whole list of do's and don'ts and what they wanted people, how they wanted people to live, to try to avoid that personal growth, that personal step, taking a step every time. To avoid these problems, you just tell everybody that they need to behave like this and this and this and that, because then I'm not affected, then I'm not offended all the time. If you don't do that, then I'm not offended. That's fine for me. I like that. So these things are very, very important. Now, at the same time, the building of that city has always been excused not to do because we need to grow the inner consciousness. We're too crude inside, and we're going to do yoga first, and when are we going to do that yoga? You know, we're here now for more than 50 years. How long is that yoga going to take? Another 500 years, and then we're going to build the city, because then finally we've gotten something. It's very difficult. So I understood by being in creativity, little by little I understood it's needed. We need to have a material, outward and societal structure that pushes us to go further. Because if that outward, if we all live like 500 meters away from the next neighbor at least, I don't know, if we all have a big villa with the things, there's no, why change? I love it. It's all fine. Everything is great. Woo, I'm doing fine here. You know, this is paradise, like the lady said in the visitor center at that time. So that whole thing is, I feel it's not possible. You need to have a reality, a material, a societal reality around you that helps you. It doesn't need to be nasty. Of course, the world, we come from an evolution of inconscience, and we're growing out. So far, we have been in the negative half of the evolution. Everything has fallen on the negative part of the things. And so everything we did was, that's why suffering is there. Everything is, all of our pushes to go out have come from negative impulses. We move out of things, we grow in consciousness out of negative experiences because we don't want it, because this is uncomfortable, we don't want it. Because from the moment we're comfortable and in our comfort zone, everything is fine, let's stay here, it's all perfect, don't do anything. So this is, of course, the most central part of the yoga probably is that we grow into a state of consciousness where we don't need suffering and negative impulses anymore to move forward. We just want to move forward because we want to move forward, because we see that it's beautiful to move forward. And it's what the story that Mother had, the little play that Mother had written of the voyage. I think it's called The Voyage, where people go on a mountain hike and everybody drops off at one point because for them that's enough and they don't want to move anymore. And the real consciousness, the real higher consciousness is a consciousness that will keep on moving, because that's what it's until we have reached really the divine, we've not reached it, so we will keep moving on. Now, the inner and the outer, so there has been a lot of excuses for not building the city by saying that, no, but first we need to have the inner ready, and the inner will shape the outer. Well, I've come to understand that no, the outer will shape the inner also very much. And you need to climb both. It needs to just do this all the time. You need to go a little bit higher inner. That creates the higher, influences the higher to go a little bit higher. The outer pushes the inner to move higher, and it just needs to, both need to go together. Now, what is my inner reality? How do I go about these things, and how do I influence that thing? One of the big problems, not only, I mean, it's at the same time in the three levels. It's on the personal level, it's on the smaller collective level, and on the larger collective level. So for me personally, for Auroville, and for the world, the same issue is happening everywhere, and it's very clear that people have been trained. I really want to emphasize, I'm convinced that it is training, conditioning, brainwashing, if you want. It's taught. We are trained to not have a mature understanding of ourselves, to not look maturely on ourselves, to not have a good self-reflection, but have it also completely linked to emotions, and to be very attached to labels instead of to actions. So what logically I would think that all. Let me say another thing in between as an aside. I want to say that I am convinced that if, as I more or less ended that other topic with, if we can put every fact on the table and we all can have the same very large viewpoint of reality, I am convinced that 99.9% of the people would want the same thing also, because there's only one logical consequence or logical decision to take. I think that if we all can see reality from as much as a large viewpoint as possible and as objective as possible, we all want the same thing, we all choose the same thing, because it's obvious. We all want happiness. For as many people as possible, we want happiness. And the road to get there is obvious then, I think. I mean, there might be, I cannot imagine that there would be much choice left. because the road would be, it would show itself to us. It would be clear. Now, back to inner, outer, and identity. The same thing, I would say, is true for human beings. I think 99.99% of human beings want the same things and feel more or less the same things. We all want other people to be happy. I think that everybody has had the experience that the most gratifying experience we have in life, and I doubt there are many people that don't have that, but the most gratifying experience in life is when we can make our loved ones happy. If we love someone and we can be the reason of their happiness, it gives something that's out of this world. It's another experience. It's about the highest experience that we have in the low consciousness we are in so far. It's about as close to a diviner kind of thing that we can get, is making our loved ones happy. And it's an experience that we all share. It's not something that you have to explain it's normal for almost everybody, it's normal. But so if you don't have that, or if that is pushed to be, why is that not the central part of our society? Why is that not the central part of our life? That understanding that we're not at our happiest when we make ourselves happy. We're at our happiest when we make our loved ones happy. I would not even generalize to say anyone else happy, because that's already a step further. That's where Auroville is for, to understand that making humanity as a whole happy is the greatest happiness we can have. But in a lower, already higher low, in the highest, where we can go in the lower zones, you would say it's our loved ones already, which is already very altruistic. It's somebody else. It's outside of my personality. It is someone else. So how is that not the basic, the central part of our life? Is that we all understand that and work for that. Okay, if we are the most happy when we make other people happy, why don't we just create everything around us to make that happen? So yeah, our society is built on not making that happen, and we're trained very, very, with all kinds of money and time spent on it. We're trained to just not look at that, push that aside, and pretend that it doesn't even exist. We're trying, I mean, our society really tries to say that love doesn't exist really as love, while at the same time it knows how important love is and how deep it is. And so it tries to turn it into some kind of greed, some kind of material nonsense, which it isn't. Now, in such a setting, how do we assess who we are? How do we feel who we are? One of the big parts of our society and our life is the fact that we are not able to have a mature understanding of ourselves, which is the most silly thing in the world. We are nothing but ourselves, apart from the fact that we're the divine and everything. I mean, if you look at it from a very ordinary perspective, we are just only ourselves. There's nobody else. We are. And how can we then not understand ourselves maturely? How is it possible that we are filled from top to bottom with insecurities about ourselves, with not feeling okay about ourselves, with not having all kinds of needs that are not even about ourselves, but are about the perception of ourselves, that are about what other people think we are. Why is that, and why should that be there? That can only be trained, because if we are naturally living and normally living the way we would always do, without having all of that influence, we would figure that out. We would look at ourselves and understand. And while growing up in our teenage years and becoming very self-conscious, we would figure out a way, or society should help us to figure out a way to not be so insecure and to feel very confident and think, okay, this is me, and I have these and these and these defects, and that's fine. That's okay, I'll work on that. Let me see how I can change that. Oh, it's difficult. Well, okay, I'm on the way, we'll do. But we're trained to be constantly more or less hysterical about who we are ourselves, and that we're not good enough, and that we're not doing this, that enough, and that other people think this and that of us, and this and that. And so at the same time, to solve that, instead of looking at, but I do this, I mean, what is the most logical definition of who I am would be, well, my actions in this moment, because I've not been the same person over my whole life. If I consider how I was 20 years ago, I was a very different person. Why do I have to be that same thing? I mean, it's still part of my life, but I don't identify anymore like that person. I don't feel that that is me. I would not be able to do any of these things anymore, probably, because I've changed now. So I'll just wrap up very quickly, but saying, what is very, very important at this moment, and very much used constantly in Auroville, is labels. I am this because I have this label, not because of my actions, not because of things, but because I have trained and I have been labeled like this all my life. I am an Aurovillian since so much. I'm a pioneer. I'm a new, all kinds of labels that define people instead of their actions. Well, the only thing we should look at is, but how do you behave? What do you do? Does that not make you an Aurovillian or not? Does that not make you a good or a bad person, if need be? Does that not make you valuable or invaluable or whatever? I mean, it's not your actions. I mean, let's just leave it at that. I hope that the two things I want to say are clear. One was that finding out what reality is a very, very difficult job. And the second thing is, persons we are trained to identify as labels instead of as our actions. Thank you so much. I hope you're not fallen asleep yet.
Just before you finish, I'd like to ask you a question, which is, all the new people that are going to come to Auroville, is there any message that you want to give them?
Please come. Welcome, thank you. Please come, join here. Come and build a city with us, come. Everything is to be done here, everything. And we're gonna make it paradise, really. But it will be a societal paradise, and not just material, I mean, not a few palm trees. But please come to Auroville.
Thank you. We're going to have a moment of silence.
Yes.